Okay guys, Joe here with HotShot.com. Sorry we got disconnected. This will be part 3 of my what trailer to pick. There's really a lot of information we're trying to cram in here because there's a lot of factors, a lot of things you're going to need to be looking at. We've now moved to the forward portion of the trailer, and I begin to talk about what types of hitches that you want to run. Most of your car haulers are going to have an interchangeable hitch. You can run the kingpin setup that I have right here, or you can run a gooseneck setup. I have both. I think it's a great idea to have both. But to start to explain which one you're going to want to use for which setup, I'm going to tell you, there's 2 different types of fifth wheels. You got a fifth wheel that'll move side to side and forward and backwards, and then you've got your standard fifth wheels that'll just rock forward and backwards. If you're going to run a fifth wheel that has a side to side, forward and backwards, it's basically the same thing as running a gooseneck hitch. I run a gooseneck hitch, and I'll explain why. The reason I'm running a gooseneck hitch is because you've already got all this weight sitting down on the rear end of your truck, and if you look at videos of guys pulling trailers, you'll see that trailer's constantly swaying back there. If you're running a standard fifth wheel plate that does not rock side to side, your truck is going to absorb all that side to side action, and that kind of play can really start to wear down the shocks and the suspension components on your power unit. That's something you want to keep in mind here when you're hot shotting. Keep the wear down as least as possible. That's why I primarily run a gooseneck hitch. I have a fifth wheel hitch on here with a kingpin because I was transporting this trailer with a tractor earlier, but I do have both connections, and I try and keep both connections on the truck just in case something happens. If this trailer breaks down under a load and I'm pulling it with a gooseneck, and I have to use another truck, I can always rent another tractor and pull that with like a rental tractor and throw on a fifth wheel hitch. There's connections that you want to have, or certain equipment that you want to have, because your 7-pin blade to 7-pin round connection isn't going to necessarily mesh together. And if you try and just get a pigtail and tie that across, I've had things like the brakes just lock up the entire time. That's a mess. That's for another video. I'll teach you about the equipment and how to do that later on. But that's kind of the differences between the two. If you're going, let's say we're hauling four vehicles on this trailer, and let's say I'm doing it with a 1-ton, I'm probably going to want to run this with a fifth wheel that's not a rocking unit. If I could set up any truck, a way that I'd like to, I'd run a fifth wheel that's a non-rocker, meaning it's only forward to backwards and not side to side, and then an actual gooseneck ball underneath that, because you have hitches that'll enable you to do that. I'll show you that on my truck here in just a second. But they do make a 25,000-pound hitch that will ride on the rails underneath your fifth wheel hitch, so that you can switch back and forth. That would be the way that I would go if I was running 4 vehicles on this trailer. Let's say 4 mid-sized vehicles, and I was a little top heavy, because once you get that 4th vehicle up over here, this gets really top heavy, because the only thing that can stabilize it is the three rear axles back there with the 6 wheels, and that's 50 feet behind us almost from the forward point up here. So that's something to keep in mind. We can go a little bit further in explanation on that later, but this is something you're definitely going to want to look for. If I'm buying a trailer, I'm going to want to have an interchangeable gooseneck and fifth wheel hitch up on the front of that. If it comes with a fifth wheel and you plan on running a gooseneck, of course, always make sure that you have your breakaway, you have your safety chains, and then the appropriate wiring. One of the things I'm always going to look for, make sure this thing has good wiring. I made the mistake of buying a trailer once that didn't have the best wiring, and it ended up just being a nightmare. Good thing about Kaufman trailers, they come with a wiring harness. You order a trailer, 10 years later, the wiring is still in immaculate condition, as long as it's taken care of. That's, like I said before, I don't get paid by Kaufman to make that recommendation, but I do have 2 of their trailers. In my opinion, they're some of the best trailers made in the market. There's something else I told you I'd talk to you about before as we come around the trailer. is the securement of the ramps. It's not, you know, there's pros and cons to these ramps being secured on the side, and this is something you might not think about if you're not in the industry. Now, I showed you before that I have room for securement for these ramps on the rear. This trailer did come with steel ramps. Really not a big fan of those things. Anybody that's had to move steel ramps, those puppies are like 85 pounds a piece. If you can get to a point where you can shell out the money, get the aluminum ramps, I'm not even joking. I can lift these things with a few fingers. They're incredibly light, they're incredibly strong. I think the pair of these ramps here are rated for 5,000 pounds as a unit. Very, very nice to have aluminum ramps. I do have these on hooks on the side of the trailer. Very common thing you're gonna see nowadays. There's some pros and cons about doing it like that. The pros, obviously, are that you're not crawling underneath the car in the rear to pull the ramps out. The cons are that these ramps were put on the same side as the side you'll be moving through traffic. So every time I have to pull these ramps off the side of this trailer, I'm in a lane of traffic that's moving. Fortunately, that's just kind of the name of the game. That's a risk that in car hauling industry, we're just always in moving traffic. I'll show you some tips and tricks in other videos later on that are going to help you minimize the risk of unloading and loading in traffic, and some things to remember that help you do it a lot safer. But the pros and cons of the ramps being on the side, definitely that you have to pull them off. If you're going to do this on your own, my suggestion would probably be on the other side. The only cons to that is if you're loading or unloading in like more of a rural area and you're pulling over on the side of a country road, you're going to be pulling those things off in a ditch or on the maybe in tall grass or in the trees or something like that. It might be hard for you to get to, and that's why I can see why they would put them on this side. But I've never had any problems with anything like that on the other side. That's just kind of the way that my trailer was set up. And then the final thing that I really want to talk about here, and this is one of the most important things I guess I could say, is if you look at these two trailers I have here, they're both the same length wedges. They're not parked perfectly. This one wedge here is parked about a foot further back. But if you look at it, these axles do not align, and that is called that's called your spread. And not, a lot of times on your trailers, you get the trailer spread will be the separation of this axle to this axle, this axle. This spread is the distance between my kingpin and my first axle. Now, this distance between my kingpin and my first axle is greater than the distance between my kingpin and this first axle. There's pros and cons to this. Let me tell you, something I love about this trailer and something I love about this trailer. Okay, this trailer is always going to ride a lot more smooth empty. If I am going to be hauling only one larger vehicle on the rear end of this trailer, the front end of that vehicle is going to sit over here, which means that the front end sits above the axles, which gives me which means I can tow a larger vehicle on its own. One thing you never want to do is put the majority of your weight behind the axles. So having a larger spread, meaning that I can get that motor above, on top, or in front of these axles and still keep my height down, enables me to haul one vehicle that might be like that Sprinter van, or in some instances small ambulances, a bunch of stuff like that. This trailer here is a horse of a different color. It works in a different way. What this trailer enables you to do is to pull on two vehicles on the top and then counterbalance. Now I want you to think back, some of you guys are old enough to remember this, some of you guys aren't, is that seesaw when we were in school, right? We put the bigger kid on this side, and then we put, the littler kids, we have to stack maybe a couple on there because we get that rocking action. Well, that's exactly what happens here. So what we try and do when we load these wedges, we always load from the lightest vehicle all the way to the heaviest vehicle. Unfortunately, with this vehicle, we're always backing our vehicles on to keep our weight on the trailer, especially our last vehicle, so we swing as much of that weight off the rear end of the truck as possible. Here's the reason why. On my truck, I'm only going to have two axles. Okay, the majority of that weight's only going to sit on one, versus this trailer where all of my weight seats evenly dispersed on three 7,000-pound axles or three 8,000-pound axles. So we want to keep that weight on our trailer. This trailer makes it easier because this trailer has what we call a pad that sits behind the axles that's more space for us to leverage that weight up and off the truck versus this one. You see, there's a big pro and a con. So if I was buying a trailer and I didn't know any better when I got into this, one of the biggest things I would be asking is, what is the distance from the kingpin to the first axle? This is not only important just for the states that you're going in, because you're going to need to know that for the state of California, but it's also important for how you're going to be loading your vehicles and what kind of vehicles you're going to be loading, especially if you're going to have flips off the front and you're going to be anticipating hauling multiple vehicles. Because I can tell you, with the spread being further back here, I've got a lot more weight on my rear end. That's gonna go into our next video where we talk about what to look for when you're looking into trucks. I wanted to put something out there on trailers just so that you guys kind of have a general idea of what you're looking for. And there's a lot of stuff that I think is just general knowledge after this that I can kind of point out. Look for rust spots, cracks. If it looks like they haven't been taking care of the trailer, they probably haven't. You know, make sure you're checking the grease on the inside of it, asking them what kind of grease they're using. If they don't know what kind of grease they're using, they're probably not using much grease at all. You know, like I said, check the wiring. Wiring is always important. I always suggest having a certified mechanic come through, take a look at the trailer. They're gonna look for and see a lot of things they're constantly repairing on a normal basis. That's the best way to go. Tires, you know, a lot of people really put a strong emphasis on tires. While I'm saying it's not something you want to skip right over, it's something that that's really not going to be as important in the long run, because you're going to be changing those tires out once a year. In a year, that won't matter as much. Whether or not you have a crack on your frame or someone's trying to hide rust, or you're going to have to replace panels, or it's going to fail a DOT, it's going to be a bigger issue in the long run, something that's going to cost you a lot of money. So it doesn't always have to be the prettiest thing in the world. This other trailer here was manufactured by a company no longer in business in 1998. It's definitely not the prettiest thing in the world, but it gets the job done. One last thing I did actually want to talk about, the difference between trailers, is you got to look at the trailer width. This trailer here is 8 inches shorter in width than this trailer right here. This is a 108-inch trailer. Now, for most of you guys looking to get into the automotive transportation industry, this isn't going to matter. I've actually put my dually on this truck. I get about ½ an inch on either side. It's very close. It's not something I want to run all the way to the top on, but I can do it, no problem. As far as vehicles go, nothing within my weight category I've ever had a problem loading on this trailer. Now, where we go into something different is the wider units, and these ones we get a different capability. With these wider trailers, we can actually transport other trailers, small cargo units. If that's something you're looking at getting into, you're going to need to have that wider trailer. Don't just go into it thinking that all wedges are built the same, because if you get a width trailer this size, you're going to be sorely let down once you get down there to get loaded, and you're looking at half your tires hanging off. Because even though this trailer here is more narrow than this trailer, and they're both legal to go down the road, if I am hanging off on the edges of this trailer, I still have to have an oversized permit because it exceeds the boundaries of my trailer in certain states. So this is something to really keep in mind. Wider trailers are nicer because you get more foot room when you're working around your loads. That might not be a big deal for some of you. That might be a big deal for others. Just something to keep in mind. I'm trying to remember everything possible to keep you guys informed, but yeah, well, that's it for me on how to select a trailer. Again, if you're not subscribed to my channel, subscribe to my channel, and let me know if there's anything that you have any questions about, or any other things that I can fill you in on. I'd be glad to do it. Thanks again.